But we are, equally disappointed. I'm sure all of you we're hoping to have both candidates represented tonight. And so, yeah, I just wanted to make sure you all know that we did attempt multiple times to reach out to Deborah's campaign, and unfortunately they never responded. And so we're grateful to be here tonight with Jill, and she's going to be, I don't think she's here yet. She's going to be joining us shortly. So the plan tonight is,
no, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jill. I didn't see you pop in. So many folks are popping in. So the plan tonight is we will have our executive director, Dr. Robert Craig, ask some questions of Jill, and then we will open it up to members towards the end. So if members want to just put in any questions that they have into the chat, we will get to those questions towards the end of our program. Jill, thank you so much for being here with us tonight, and also for extending your time. We originally talked with your campaign team about having you on for about 30 minutes, but with the kind of change in folks joining us today, we appreciate you being willing to stay with us a little bit longer so that we can have a more in-depth conversation with you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the offer very much.
Yes. And so with that, I will put our executive director, Robert Craig, and Jill on the screen, and we'll let you take it from here, Dr. Craig.
Thank you, Joanna, and keep chatting away. Folks will be, I can't always stare at the chat when I'm asking questions, but I'll be being informed, and obviously we hope to get to a bunch of your questions as well, particularly ones that aren't covered in the preliminary questions. So thanks everyone for joining us. This is the Essence of Democracy. And Jill, thank you. I mean, we would have liked both candidates, but we'll let the other candidate's absence communicate a message. So, and the dog didn't like that the other.
Oh, sorry.
So let me just jump right in to the first question. Obviously, we're in a pandemic, and whether schools should be open or hybrid or all virtual or what grades has been a major point of controversy and has certainly been politicized a great deal to an unfortunate degree. I know you're going to be the state's leading educator, the voice of public education in the state of Wisconsin. And we have CDC guidelines where there are 6 clear criterion, and part of it has to do with community transmission rates. And it certainly appears that for most of Wisconsin, they certainly would not qualify to
I found on the web.
Oops, excuse me.
Wikipedia.org. Wisconsin is the 20th.
Alexa wanted to answer that question for you, Jill.
Yes. Okay, sorry about that. Actually, the prompt, the wake up word for that one is not that word, that name, but nonetheless, something triggered it. So anyway, so frankly, my question is, given what the CDC guidelines are, and they're the closest thing we have to a scientific consensus, it would appear that a very large number of school districts that are open in Wisconsin are in violation of these standards. And so, and there really is a huge issue around not just teacher safety, but support staff and then community safety, because whether or not schools are a primary mode of transmission, we're in a pandemic, and it will, and the things we brought home, you know, to teachers and support staff family, to students family. And it seems like if we're going to reopen and reopen safely, it should be following these criteria as far as what grades can come back, whether it's hybrid, how often. But you don't have, for example, you're supposed to have near universal masking. And that's currently not being enforced in most schools in Wisconsin. This is what educators tell us. And right now in Wisconsin, it's a patchwork because there is no clear state guidance. Fortunately, we have federal guidance now. Local public health departments are supposed to provide guidance. Many do not. And so, and then school districts in many cases, according to reports, have violated guidance when they do. So I just want to see as the state's chief educator, we know how important it is to the kids it be open, but it's also traumatic. if a parent or an aunt or uncle or grandparent gets COVID because they're open, or if something happens to a teacher, beloved support staff, a janitor or a gym teacher, etc. So just want to see where you stand on reopening and what you'll be advising with the bully pulpit you will have once elected.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thanks, Dr. Craig. And everybody, just thanks so much for giving up, your dinner hour to meet me. I'm happy to be here and happy to answer any questions that you guys may have. As far as school reopening is concerned, I want schools open just as much as everybody else. Every parent, I have 2 kids in middle school right now at the Pecatonica Area School District where I am the superintendent. But parents want their schools open, teachers want their schools open, everybody wants them open. In my situation, I'll tell you, my school is open, but we gave parents a choice of working, having their kids stay home and go to school 100% virtually, or go face to face. And we've had to close a couple times, if we've had an outbreak. But what I understand from the data shows that there was a report that actually came out today that I'll talk about in a minute, but the data shows that masking works, and good hygiene, hand washing works, social distancing works, and the schools that have been able to do these things successfully have been very good about controlling the spread of the virus. We also know that adults are more likely to get COVID than kids. And then that was confirmed today with a report out of Georgia, where they had, shown where there was an outbreak among the schools. It was the adults that got it, and then the kids were the carriers that brought it home. So that being said, if you're able to, successfully physically distance, for example, and then follow all these other recommended procedures, like making sure everybody is masked up, everybody is, doing the physical distancing and the hand washing. And we hired additional staff to help with cleaning. We hired additional food service staff so that, because a lot of things became single serve. I mean, we did a lot of different things and we've been very successful. But I know that a lot of schools can't do this. They can't physically distance because their schools are, my school has a lot of space. We don't have as many kids, but I know some schools don't have that, that option. And so without the ability to physically distance and follow those other procedures, we absolutely have to make sure that teachers get the vaccine. That seems to be the safest way to proceed, as well as then being able to do other things as much as possible, such as having additional PPE, perhaps hire staff. But we need a plan, and you need to have people's voices on that plan. We've had teachers, parents, school board members, community members, all part of our plan. And that's what other schools need to do too. I do think it needs to stay local. But I also feel that DPI's role is to provide this guidance, that if you can't do, for example, the physically distancing, or if you can't make sure everybody's going to wear a mask, then they certainly need to, they certainly need to keep their kids virtual. But, we have to be able to open our schools safely. And people need to have confidence in the schools that they can keep their kids safe, not just like, as you said, because of the kids, but also because of their family members at home, and because of the teachers, and because of whoever the school staff also has at home. Just personally, I have, a couple family members who have, underlying health conditions like asthma and allergies. I also live with my in-laws live with us, in their 80s. And I know that if they were to get COVID because they haven't received their shot yet, it would be certainly, very trying for them too. So it is, I think having a plan and making sure that we're able to meet the conditions of the plan is very important.
What would you say, because the schools are all over the map on this, it's great to hear that your school district has done this in a safe manner and has the ability to do it. My brother is a middle school teacher in the Chicago area. His school's not open now. He lives with our mother, who's over 80 and is frail. And he is so anxious about that being forced to go back. and all of the media messages, they're saying it's so important to the kids, just open it safe, and the CDC is too harsh. There's a lot of claims by that. That not only is he anxiety ridden, he's thinking about quitting and, you know, damaging his retirement security when he's been teaching for over 25 years. So it does seem like there's a certain amount of cruelty to the teachers who are being treated or feel like they're being treated like cannon fodder in this and not being prioritized for the vaccine. Many districts not even following the guidelines by expecting to be back. And it's not good for the kids either, not to set that example and not to actually follow the scientific guidelines. So as the chief education officer in the state, if elected, what would you say to those teachers? Because I assume that you think it's important for us to nourish the teaching profession. We don't have enough teachers and there's a shortage of teachers, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that teachers and parents both need to be supportive of the plan. Like I shared, our school district, we had teachers and parents as part of our plan. And they need to both be supportive of it. And if one group isn't supportive of it, it's a no-go. We need to make sure that we have certain things in place, you know, and I think they need to agree on what those things are, whether it's, you know, social distancing, whether it's mask use, whether it's, you know, hiring additional personnel to help with cleaning, whatever those conditions are. And that's what we did. We met, it's like, I mean, next month, March 15th, it's 1 year. I actually was searching for something in my Google Drive today because we have a school board meeting coming up, and I put in the date March 15th, and it comes up with a message that I sent to families about the pandemic. And we met all last summer. I feel like we didn't have any summer vacation or any kind of break, because what our teachers and our administrators have been doing is just, we've been relentless in trying to make sure that we can come up with a plan that people can support. And like I said, it's a little easier for us because we're smaller, but there are lots of schools in Wisconsin that don't have proper ventilation, and that has to be part of the plan. If they can't ensure that they have a good HVAC system that could mitigate the spread of the virus, because we know that's how it spreads, that has to be one of the criteria. Like, there has to be a lot of things. And what I would say, you know, as the lead at DPI is like, here are the criteria, and locally you guys decide if these criteria can be met. And in the case of Chicago, I have a cousin who's an assistant principal in the Chicago public schools. It's the same thing. You know, I think that they need to decide. And again, in Chicago, like in Milwaukee, their buildings are older, right? And they're not going to have air conditioning. They're not going to have a lot of resources to hire people. So we're going to need to make sure that, as the head at DPI, the state superintendent, I'm advocating for more funding to come to our schools so that we can hire more people to be able to mitigate the spread of COVID. Make sure we have funding for masks and hand sanitizer and soap. Making sure that we have the technology and the rural broadband and the wireless access, because that's also an issue too if we're going to stay virtual. And I think, you know, the people have been very good. I'm going to just say on the right, you know, as far as politicizing this, right? They're going to they're going to pit teachers, everybody against the teachers, right? They're going to claim that the teachers are being selfish or the teachers are being lazy. And that's really, couldn't be farther from the truth, because the teachers they want to be back just as much as anybody else. It's just that they need to make sure that it's safe. And that's what we would have to do at the state, is identify these gating metrics and make sure that the local school districts follow them.
I'm glad you mentioned the HVAC. That hasn't been talked about nearly enough. And we know this is a virus that goes through the air, and that ventilation and circulation is probably more important than a lot of the other things we talk about. And it's particularly a big variation among schools. So thanks for all that. That was really helpful, all that you laid out. Wanted to ask you about testing. You know, educators are very critical about what some call the test and punish regime. Education reformers like Diane Ravitch and Linda Darlin Hammond have written extensively, and many others, about it distorting education, people teaching to the test, it taking creativity out of teaching, and it really not improving education. It's just a way to try to punish schools rather than to actually invest in schools. So I want to see what you think about whether we over test right now and whether we need to de-emphasize testing. There's also a huge testing industry, as you know, there's a huge interest.
Yeah. It was one of the first questions I asked, and I can't remember even honestly the answer, because the amount of money, I want to know how much money we spend on contracts for assessment in Wisconsin, and it was in the, like the triple digit $1 million, when you think about it. And I do feel that we over test. I would love to move away from assessments, at least the most high stake ones. I mean, part of it is funding, because then that money could be used, for better purposes in our schools, right? Getting to the highest poverty schools or the kids that need it the most. I wish that we didn't spend so much time teaching to the test, so that students had more time to receive a well-rounded education, including creative endeavors, but also science and social studies. I know that there's a number of elementary schools that skimp on science and social studies because they need to devote more time to reading and math. Or more lunch time or more recess also. I mean, it would take an act of Congress to move away from this because of the federal laws around testing. There's, of course, the accountability pieces to it. And I would advocate for that. I do feel that, testing or assessment has a place. If we have to do just like just a point in time, that's fine, right? We can do that. But the amount of time that we spend on not just the forward exam, but also on the NAEP, which is the National Assessment for Education Progress. Also the ACT. I mean, there's a lot of things when you think about it. I'm a big fan of Diane Ravitch. For those of you who don't know who she is, she was an undersecretary of education. And she was very much pro assessment, pro testing, and she's completely, she will fully admit that she's come around and that she doesn't feel that it has the place that, maybe people think it should have. I do feel that there is, like I said, a place for it, but we do spend a lot of time on it. And I feel that more local assessments, formative and summative, are better, as far as determining kids' progress. Because right now what we have is a system that just pits school districts against other school districts. It doesn't tell us anything. When it gets reported out in the newspapers, I mean, it doesn't tell us anything we don't already know. We know that the best resource schools are going to produce, the best test scores as well. The kids that have the most opportunities are going to have the best test scores, and those schools will have the higher grade. And then the schools that don't have the most resources, or the lowest resource schools, will have the lowest test scores. I mean, we know that the highest poverty schools are going to have the lowest test scores. If you put it on a scatter plot, there is a correlation between student income and test score. So it's not telling us what we need it to tell us. And so if that's the case, then we shouldn't be doing it as much as we are.
Right, it tests reliably privilege, not the effectiveness of schools with the resources they have, with the challenges that the kids face, right? So let me ask you, it's been controversial for a while, but became very controversial with the real cresting of the Black Lives Matter movement last year, which is now by the numbers the largest social protest movement in American history. And the largest outpouring of white support for Black liberation in American history. That number of school districts have moved to actually cancel their contracts with police departments, to have police in schools. And so what do you think, and what kind of guidance, or what do you think DPI should even have a role in that? But that there really is there's both a safety question, an education question, particularly for marginalized kids who have grown up seeing the police, because of their experiences, their family's experiences, as a hostile force, not as a friendly, welcoming, force
Right.
for safety.
Yeah, so let me address this in two different ways. So the first part with school resource officers, I do believe that they don't really have, I think that the role that they've played in schools is not what the intention should be. I think a school resource officer shouldn't be somebody who is roaming the halls, kind of a gotcha, arresting kids, that kind of thing, because that just leads to the school to prison pipeline, and the criminalization of Black youth in particular. I do feel that school resource officers could serve a role, when we talk about, programs like with, community support, like mental health and social workers, as part of a student support team. I do feel that, as far as building relationships, in our community, that's part of it, like community policing, for example. It's about relationships. It's not about, catching people when they're doing something wrong. I also feel that the money that we could save on these contracts could go towards hiring more social workers and school counselors too. I'm also a big fan of restorative justice practices too, as an alternative to suspensions and expulsions. And I feel that that's something that hasn't really been elevated much in the conversation. Those programs work. And again, it's about relationships, about communication. It's about realizing the inherent good in people, and kids are born good. And I think that that's something that people forget, and then restorative justice is something that people realize that, ultimately the harm their actions have caused, to the community or other people. And restorative justice helps them realize that. As far as the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm in support of Black Lives Matter, and I think DPI needs to take a more active role on that. The issue in Wisconsin is that we don't have a state board of education. It's the state policymaker is the state superintendent, whereas in other states, they have a state board who, determines the curriculum, who determines the textbooks that schools use, the supplemental materials, all these things. But in Wisconsin, it's that step is gone. So it's really the state superintendent, and we believe in Wisconsin in local control. And so my role at the DPI would be to advocate for programs such as a curriculum that is diverse. We don't even enforce which standards our schools use, for example, in civics education. But I mean, civics education, current events, these are all very important aspects of, just growing up to be a well-informed citizen, understanding critical thinking, thinking about primary sources, questioning why things are the way they are. I mean, there's a role DPI could play in this, working with the legislature, for example, to advocate for maybe even, I hate to say it, but like laws. Sometimes that's the only way you can get things done is by having it in law, like we do, for example, agricultural education, environmental education, Native American peoples, cooperatives. I mean, these are things in law, because otherwise, if we didn't have them, there's some argument whether or not they would be taught. So one of the things I want to do is have an equity officer at the department on the cabinet who will oversee equity audits. If you're familiar with those, they would look at curriculum, they'd look at hiring practices, and they'd work with school districts to identify discrepancies. They'd look at school handbooks and discipline policies, making sure that we're not over disciplining, children of color, or special education students or students with disabilities, EL learners, looking at all these things, looking at participation rates of kids who identify as LGBTQ, for example, in athletics or in, STEM programs, whatever it is, but just making sure that whatever the student body population is equally represented in all aspects of student life.
Great. And I want to guess that I have two more, but one of them is in a topic area many people are asking about. So that'll cover the question of help us get to a lot of the questions coming in. It's about school privatization. You know that in Wisconsin, we have a wide variety of these. On the one extreme, voucher schools, which have not in any way lived up to the promises for them and are having a detrimental effect in many people's opinion, in our organization's opinion. Charters, of course, there are charter schools that are actually instruments of local school board, democratic school boards, and those that are not.
Right.
It's the position of our organization that we should only have charter schools that are under Democrat control of elected school boards. And I want to, and that the others are unaccountable and are undermining public education even if some of them are good schools, they are mostly looking to get a better group of students and cream them out of public schools, therefore harming public schools and simply creating a false impression of any alleged advantage they have. So I want to see what your take was on that. I know that there is huge political forces at play here, so it's not like you can wave a wand as DPI secretary.
Yes, that's there are definitely huge political forces at play here. So my platform and my personal belief is that I'm against school choice. I believe that our public dollars need to stay in our public schools. But again, as state superintendent, I'd have to implement the law as written. And so what I would be doing was I'd be advocating to, I would want to stop the expansion of taxpayer funded private schools. I would want to ensure all people, let's say in Wisconsin, understand how much of their tax dollars goes into the voucher program in particular. And as you said, Dr. Craig, school choice is a lot of things, right? It's not just vouchers. It's also, the special needs scholarship. It's also independent charter schools that are not, governed by their locally elected school boards. School choice in Wisconsin also includes open enrollment. And I don't have any issues necessarily with open enrollment. But I'm against putting tax dollars, public dollars in private schools. And of the, school choice that goes into private, it's about $850 million a year. And I don't think people in Wisconsin know that. The other piece of that is that just the voucher side of things is $380 million a year. And if you divided that 380 million by 860,000 public school kids, that comes out to $450 per every public school kid that is not going into their school. So if you have 1,000 kids in your school district, that's $500,000 more or less every year that your school, is losing, on because of vouchers. And people in Wisconsin don't know this. And I think that if they did, they would have something more to say about it. But it is stuff that has been passed in budget bills in the past under Scott Walker. And that's where this election is extremely important, because what we have is me, the progressive candidate, who's very vocally against expansion of school vouchers, and I'd like to eliminate them entirely. And then my opponent, who has come out and supported school vouchers. She's actually been endorsed by, Scott Walker, who calls our public schools government-run schools. And for me, this is all very triggering. And it's part of the reason I'm running is because somebody has to stand up and just say enough already. We don't need two taxpayer-funded school systems. We need one, and it needs to be our public schools.
Great, thank you for that. One final question, then we're going to try to pick as many member questions here as possible. School funding formula.
Mm-hmm.
Look, we have a highly unequal education system, and the promise of Brown versus Board of Education has not been realized, partly because segregation was reinforced because we've had a flight of parents who can to higher property tax areas, leaving the other kids who tend to be disproportionately either rural kids or Black and brown kids in cities with substandard schools where their kids actually need more educational resources because they have more disadvantage going into school than the wealthier kids. And it allows a number of parents to essentially spend more tax dollars themselves in order to fund their own kids' education and deny that to others and create what amounts to a two-tiered school system. Now, 2/3 state spending, which is of education, is one of the tools that's been used, though it's been a kind of an honor system, and many legislatures have not kept it up. But it seems like if we're going to achieve the promise of truly equal education, we need to go further than that we need to overhaul the whole funding system and take it off of property taxes altogether. And quite frankly, the most progressive income tax is an income tax, unless you want to talk about wealth taxes, which are even more controversial.
Mhm.
So it just seems like, since there's so much more talk now about structural racism, and there are other problems here too, because rural school districts are not in great shape either in the state of Wisconsin, many of them. If you would use your bully pulpit to advocate, I understand it would change, your laws have to change. You would not have any control over this per se, other than the credibility you'd have with your office. Actually trying to create a true educational equality, which probably means spending more money for the most disadvantaged school districts, not less.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time a school referendum passes, it's kind of that saying, every time you hear a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. Every time a school referendum passes in Wisconsin, the school funding formula becomes more inequitable. And it's really, our school expenses haven't been able to keep, the school expenses haven't been able to keep up with whatever the legislature has been able to allocate to our schools. As they expand the voucher program, as they've given tax breaks, for example, for Foxconn, that was $600 million right there in 1 year. As they, prioritize other things, that money comes out of what we would normally get in public education. And they used to give 2/3 funding, as you said, and then in the last recession, I want to say it was 2007-9, Jim Doyle, who's governor at the time, said, we can't do it because we didn't have enough money in revenue. And then ever since then, the promise has not been realized. Then of course, Act 10 happened, and we lost $600 per student after that. And the money never went back in. We balanced our budgets on the back of our teachers and our support staff. And then no money came in throughout the 2000s, the aughts. And so now finally, right before COVID hit, we finally hit what we were spending in our schools, or the money that we received from the legislature, what we would have gotten, what we got in 2009. So we've had a decade of austerity cuts. And you're right. It's unsustainable right now to just keep using property taxes. Some other states use a percentage of their gross domestic product. And I've looked at other states that have been able to be, more equitable in how they fund their schools. But you also said it best too, that the schools that need it the most need to get the most money. The kids that need it the most need to get the most money. Those kids cost more to educate. And it comes down to opportunities. The best resource schools are going to provide the most opportunities. And of course, those kids are just going to do better. And we are becoming we are segregated. And I testified at the Blue Ribbon Commission when they were in Fenimore, Wisconsin, in 2017. And I used that exact phrase of separate, but equal. And you look at facilities, when you look at teacher recruitment and retention, you look at the salaries you're able to pay our teachers, you look at the services you could provide kids, the opportunities, the after school program, the early childhood program. There's so many different things that we are coming up with a system of those who have and the ones that have not. And so as state superintendent, I would work with the legislature to implement their recommendations from the Blue Ribbon Commission in 2018. They had come up with a plan. And it was, to include money, to the highest poverty schools. It looked at rural schools. It looked at sparsity aid. It looked at increasing the special education reimbursement rate from what it is right now, 28% to 60%. The choice schools get 90% for special education. So the messages that are there too, that certain kids are worth more, if they go to a private school than they do, to public school. So there's a lot of work to do. And I think, how do you do it? It's communication for me. I think people are just unaware, throughout the state of how much money is not, they think that they pay a lot in property taxes, and they do, but they think it's going to their public schools, and it's not. And I think if they knew where it was really going, there would certainly be some peer pressure, I feel. And gerrymandering is a big piece of this too. I mean, so in my district, Howard Markline, for example, he's the chair now of the Joint Finance Commission, and he's, represents Dodgeville, and he represents Mineral Point and Richland, all the way down to Monroe, and all of Southwest Wisconsin, Platteville. And he votes, to increase the charter. I'm sorry, not the charter, the voucher student enrollment. He, routinely votes in favor of school privatization. And there's no choice schools here yet, but on the other, it's like we have to ask these questions. People in his, jurisdiction, in his district, need to ask, why is it that you vote for these things? And they need to demand an answer. But so far, it's like people just are not aware.
Yeah, thank you for that. I hope you, if elected, are able to make that case. I think that case needs to be made. And what message does it send to a Latinx kid or an African American kid when they get to see a suburban high school, how they're valued versus how suburban, predominantly white kids are valued? And they don't have any of those resources or glimmering buildings or anything. And so
even the rural kids too, the rural kids also.
Yeah,
they
agree.
It's, for sure.
So, and I'll ask Joanna, and Joanna can also, and you can let us know when we have to cut this off. But Joanna can look at the chat and see if there are other questions. The question I saw that stood out that we haven't gotten to at all is, and there's a problem in a lot of professions right now, and in Wisconsin there's a push for this, but there's a national push, is the solution to a shortage is to cheapen the certification. And there have been pushes to do that. There will continue to be around teachers. As the chief education leader in the state of Wisconsin, what do you think about that kind of a response to the teacher shortage? Obviously, we're not favorably inclined towards it, but just want to obviously just ask an open question and see because we really need, we think we really need advocacy on this, on the importance of highly qualified teachers and making this a profession that will draw the best and the brightest, given the importance of the profession and of teaching our young people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of the things my opponent will taught is the fact that she was part of the committee that loosened up the licensing requirements, to make, it easier to become a teacher. And I'm not in favor of that. I don't feel that that's the answer, because we need to make sure that we have individuals who are prepared, to lead a classroom, to educate kids, who have the knowledge, the skills and abilities and the dispositions to be teachers. What I think, or where we've gone wrong, I feel there's a lot of different things. I feel that, we have a high failure rate, for things like the DPI or the Foundations of Reading test. And not that I'm saying that these are not important, but I'm also saying, what I'm saying is though, that there has to be a different way. When we look at teacher recruitment, what you're doing is these gatekeeping exercises are really eliminating a lot of potentially really good teachers. Also, you look at teachers of color or individuals who want to become teachers, who are first generation. They're going to be unfairly treated, I guess, by standardized tests. And so we need to look at that. We also need to pay teachers more. I think that's the other piece, because, when you look at teaching used to be one of those professions where you could support a family on it. And if you had 2 teachers in your family, you were doing pretty good. And then, Act 10 happened in Wisconsin, and I know my salary went down by $400 a month. And then I thought, gosh, I was so glad my husband wasn't a teacher, because if he had been, that would have been a hit of almost, $800 a month. And their salaries have just been stagnant. And then we cut their benefits on top of it, as part of Act 10. And so I'm not in favor of loosening the requirements. I feel what we need to do is we need to elevate the prestige of becoming a teacher once again. restore the respectability that it deserves. But I also feel that part of that, if you're going to recruit people to work in, STEM subject areas in your school, I mean, there's a shortage of chemistry teachers and physics teachers and special education teachers because those skills command a lot more money in the private sector or other professions. And so we need to look at how we pay our teachers, and we need to treat them fairly. We need to treat an elementary teacher just the same in fairness as a high school teacher, because elementary teachers serve a different purpose, teaching kids to read, teaching kids how to, behave and play well with one another on top of things. And they set the foundation for, lifelong success. So not in favor of loosening the requirements. I'm just more in favor of strengthening the profession in general.
So you actually answered a question on teacher pay. I think a couple different people had in the chat. So we get to kill two birds with one stone there. Let me ask one, I don't know if Joanne has anything, but one jumped out at me just as scanning them. What about shortening summer vacation? The length of summer vacation has been critiqued broadly from an educational impact, and it's based on an agricultural system of the 19th century we no longer have, though now we have a vacation and tourism industry that wants to guarantee a broader gap. Do you think that that harms education and that we should be looking at a shorter summer break and more breaks spread out throughout the year?
Yeah, I do. I think the research points to that being effective. I don't know how many of you know this, but in Wisconsin, there's a state law that says you can't start school before September 1st. And that used to not be there. I can't remember when it was implemented. I want to say like 1997, maybe.
Something like that. And the Dells was pushing for it, right?
Yeah. And I would be in favor of putting more breaks throughout the year, and then, lengthening, maybe, there's a lot of factors that go into it, because, and I'm not saying that these are good factors, but I'll tell you what they are. Athletics, athletics controls so much of our school calendar. And we have such a high emphasis on athletics in the United States, where in other countries they don't. They don't have, athletics as part of their public school. It's all club. And then again, on the other hand, our answer to that is, well, kids, if we didn't have athletics in our public schools, would all kids have the opportunity to participate in these things? So there's a lot of changes that need to be made. A lot of states are moving to a year-round schooling schedule, and they're able to make it work. And I think we could certainly learn from them. Again, if you increase the number of days that kids are learning, you're going to have better outcomes. If you shorten the time between, vacations, you're going to have better outcomes, but also it costs more money too, because if you increase the number of days the kids are in school, we also have to increase teacher pay. And staff pay, and administrator pay, custodial, food service, all those things. So I think some of it is, I think it's well intentioned, but it's going to take a lot of fortitude, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. So, and you'll advocate for this if you're elected?
I would. Yeah. I mean, I think right now my school district, we try to get around the September 1st start date. We start in the middle of August, and we just count that those last 2 weeks of August as part of our summer school term. So if they we're among friends here, right? Nobody's going to tell on me, but what we would do is we count those days. The kids all come, we don't say it's not required. I mean, we couldn't mandate it, but they all come. But other states, their kids are starting earlier, and so they get 2 weeks extra time, in their AP classes, for example, 2 weeks that our kids wouldn't get otherwise. So we do it, and we just report it differently so that we can get around the September 1st date. But I would certainly advocate to get rid of the September 1st start date, so that local school boards can decide when they want their kids to start school.
So as to teaching, as a profession, which is a profession in crisis in many ways, and a profession we need tremendously, and need as many qualified teachers who will stick with the profession as you've talked about pay and respect, right? I mean, The profession, by the way, those are related, obviously. Our society tends to pay things it respects. So the disrespect for teachers, still a woman-dominated profession, is still a huge gender issue, I think. And it has to do with has happened with a lot of professions that are traditionally women-dominated professions. Caregiving professions, for example, is another. Someone raised a question, and this has been a big issue. Are there too many barriers to people becoming teachers, especially non-traditional students? I'm not talking here about suddenly declaring someone with a college degree from a different subject somehow qualified to teach all of a sudden, but I mean, do we need to make it easier to become a teacher for people who, and really be qualified for people who want to, but don't fit the usual profile of someone going to college when they're 18 and going into education school or teaching with a bachelor's degree at a young age in their early 20s?
Yeah, I think, there are different pathways right now, for people who, are coming from another career. For people who have a bachelor's degree, there's a pathway for people who have on-the-job experiences, for example, in the trades, to become tech ed teachers, for example. The one pathway that does not exist that I would like to work with the UW system on is for the person who maybe didn't complete college, and they didn't go into the trades, for example, but maybe the humanities or the sciences, and want to go and teach. And I think that that's a legitimate path. I mean, there's a lot of people who maybe didn't know what they wanted to do, or maybe dropped out of school or failed, in college. And then as they matured or, figured things out, they want to become teachers. There's no pathway for those people. And I do get a lot of questions about that, to my campaign email about, because I worked in licensing at DPI, and, people, it's just like you feel a lot of sympathy for them, because they're stuck, in a low wage job, for example, and you could tell they're helpers. So yeah, I would like to look at that. I would also, I think that there's legitimate ways to do that too, and other states have been able to do that. Looking at the knowledge, the skills, and the dispositions that, teachers need to have, classroom management, for example. Being able to understand different learning styles is another one. Having a toolbox of different instructional methods. Those are other things, that teachers need to have when they go into the classroom. And I think that that's certainly, something that we could look at with the UW system. I was going to tell you another aspect of that, and I can't remember what it was, but when you talked about female-dominated professions, I think about nursing, and the nurses have been able to turn that around, right? They've been able to, there was a female-dominated profession, disrespected, low pay, and they've been able to make it into a career path that commands respect and commands higher salary too. The difference, of course, is that hospitals are often private, right? But it did have an impact on the public. And so I think regardless of what it is, we're going to have to put more money into our school systems, public systems, in order to pay our staff more. But again, as I shared, how much money is going into choice? And if in the privatization of our schools, if that money was back in our public schools, I think we could certainly pay our staff more.
We had a lot of questions, various questions about special education for children with disabilities, mainstreaming, resources. Sure. What kind of reforms do you think are necessary, and what is your vision for education for children with disabilities and other special education needs in the state of Wisconsin?
Yeah, I'll just share my own personal experience. And this will probably answer the question, but my son, I'm a parent of a student with disabilities, and he's on the autism spectrum. He had some behavior issues. He had, some things he would say and tics and things like that, the other kids, didn't understand. But what really kind of turned it around for me was in the school that he was in before we came to my school here at Pecatonica, he was pulled out a lot. He was pulled out for behavior, he was pulled out for reading, all these other things. And the impact that that had on his psyche, on his self esteem, his relationships with his peers. And, it's heartbreaking, right? And so you want what's best for your kid, but you also want, as a parent of I have another child who's neurotypical. What you want for that child too is to understand that there's diversity, that there's diverse learning needs. There's, there are people in the world that you're going to interact with and work with or live with or love that are not going to think like you or behave like you. And so in his new school here at Peck, it's very inclusive. He's very rarely pulled out, for maybe like an intervention, in reading. And that's what we try to do with all our kids. Certainly there may be some situations that warrant, a smaller class size because of safety, for example. But what we have to ensure is that we have staff who are well prepared, well educated, well versed in these practices that can ensure that our kids are included, that they belong, that all kids feel safe, because that's really what makes this world, go around, is that diversity, not just, and this goes also for, other kinds of diversity too. We have to make sure that our society is fully inclusive, in order for us to maybe, just to function and to be, just, to make progress too.
Thank you for that. I know you've been generous of your time, and I think we're at time, Joanna, right? So
Yes.
I'll bring it back to you.
Yeah, I think that was a really great question to end on, Jill, for you to be able to share a little bit about your personal story. I want to be mindful of your time. I know we had you scheduled with us till 7, but I do want to give you an opportunity to maybe say a closing or anything else you'd like our members to know. I know there was a couple questions for yard signs. Not sure if you have those, but yeah, if you'd like to say anything in closing, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll address the yard sign question really quick. That's probably the number one question we're getting right now. And we're working on it. We're gonna, as soon as we have those available, we'll make sure we tell everybody who's on our mailing list to get those. And if you haven't signed up for my mailing list, my newsletter, I'll put the address here in the chat here. But I'm running for a lot of reasons, but I think maybe just based on that last answer, and part of the reasons when I talk about the facilities, and I talk about racism and just wanting our schools to be more inclusive. I want to solve these problems. I want to solve problems of inequity. And there's so many issues of inequity that plague our public schools. And I am also a proven advocate. I have a reputation of showing up for public schools, showing up for our kids, promoting research-backed programs that make our system better. And I know it's not going to be easy. I have a really good reputation. I'm really scared, I'll be honest, about putting myself out there. That's why a lot of people don't run for office, because they're worried, how they're going to get dragged through the mud and what impact that's going to have on their family. And like I shared, I have 2 kids in middle school. I'm married. I live in a small town. But my reputation is very strong and it's solid. And I feel like I could stand up against it, against anybody, but it's scary. And I need your help. I need your support. And I hope that you'll stay engaged. I hope that you'll follow along. I hope you'll help me advocate for all kids in Wisconsin, advocate for all our public schools and our communities. There's a lot of things that set me apart from my, opponent. The very least is that I'm leading a school district in a pandemic, and she's not. And so I think that there's a lot of things, but most of all, I think my intentions are very pure. I want to do this job because I want to do right by our kids. I love this state. I love kids. And I just want, what's best for them. So that's why I'm doing this. So that's a little bit more than probably you wanted, but that's who I am.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you so much. Jill will put her candidate information in the chat so you can connect with her. Thank you for being here, Jill. We appreciate you taking the time. As I said earlier, we tried multiple times to reach out to both candidates to ensure that we had a very robust conversation today. Unfortunately, we did not hear back from Deborah Kerr. And so we got to spend the evening with Jill. And so thank you so much, Jill. And we look forward to talking and working with you soon.
Yeah, I will be in touch if you guys need anything. If you want me to come back, I'm happy to. I could talk for a couple more hours if I could. So thanks for your great questions. Thanks for being engaged. Thanks for showing up. And I recognize a few names. I'm just gonna do a shout out to Pat. I see Pat. You go to church together. So and then just take care, everybody. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And you drew a big crowd too. So
You sure did.
Well for the race.
It's the celebrity aspect of running for state superintendent. I'm completely overwhelmed by that. So. All right. You guys take care.
Thank you. Take
Good night,
care.
Jill.
Be safe.
Good night.
Well, I think that was a really great conversation. Thanks, Dr. Craig, for leading it. Everybody that's still on the call, thank you so much for sticking it out with us. I just wanted to flag quickly before you jump off. There is a link in the chat if you all can provide any feedback for tonight. We would really appreciate that. We do take into consideration our members. We are looking to endorse a candidate in the DPI race, and your feedback is necessary for us to make that decision. Yeah, so there is a link in the chat. Please provide your feedback. It's helpful to us. And of course, all of your opinions and voices matter. So please fill it out. Any other closing remarks, Dr. Craig?
No, I think that was very that was very on the high side of candidate interview as far as the amount of content provided by the candidate. So
yes, and thank you everybody for submitting your questions. That was very helpful to the conversation. I think that's it, folks. Have a good night. Happy birthday to our co-op organizer, Joel, also. Everybody shout out to Joel.
Thank you. Happy birthday, Joel.
Woo, happy 29th.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you. Yeah.
Happy birthday, Joel.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Democracy's alive.
Yeah. Join a co-op if you're not already part of a co-op. Let's keep doing great work together. And there's a puppy. Have a good night, folks.
Bye, all.
I don't have the power to end this.